Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander.
Brenton, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, for sure. And I love doing interviews like this to talk with agency owners that are kind of like on the journey and doing things. And before I throw on the recorder, we're just kind of talking about like how valuable it is to talk about works in progress. I think so many podcast interviews are just people say like that have it all figured out and everything like that. And it's great to try to get back to our roots. We've had a lot of people on lately that are like doing software or have like sold an agency or whatever and are doing other things. So to bring this to you, can you talk about your background and kind of how you got to the point of starting Twiby?
Yeah, that's it's actually a pretty interesting story. I'm sure some people can actually relate to my story, but I had spent a lot of time going through corporate and just trying to, I guess, level up and just try to get a small promotion, which is always at every company, it was like twisting someone's arm just to ask for a 5K annual increase. And so I had realized that you can get a lot of leverage if you get the offer letter from the next place that's going to pay you more. And then you show them that offer letter. And then I'd usually get a promotion, but then they wouldn't match it. So then I would leave. So I would kind of jump a lot, I'd job jump a lot. And it was working out pretty well. And then a buddy had told me about it was like a director of marketing. I had just turned 30 and I was pretty excited. And the job wasn't quite right. And so the VP of marketing had actually kept talking over 3 months, and she had adjusted the job so that it was exactly what I wanted. She removed the sales aspects out of it. It was purely digital. And so I took the job. And after about 2 months, it was just like the culture fit was terrible. My manager, she didn't want to speak to me over Zoom. And then one day I got a meeting invite on my calendar, and it was the VP and HR on there. And so HR did all the talking. They basically said, we're going to let you go effective immediately. So I spent about 30 minutes just kind of complaining, just calling people, just really upset. And so I just took all that anger, I guess that might be the right word, and built an agency. And so that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's such a great way to start an agency. I love that. Like it's like what's the clash line? Anger can be power and everything, that you can use it. So that's cool. And then what, if anything, did the corporate experience teach you? Like how did you decide what kind of agency you're going to start or even like whether to start an agency based on that experience? Like how did you go in that direction?
So one thing that was tough for me in corporate is just like the lack of transparency, while corporate will talk about how important transparency is. And so just like that frustration that I had at all of my jobs, I really wanted to take that into an agency. So I wanted to have a lot of transparency with the people I work with, whether you're on my team or you're a client. So just really making sure that, whatever I say is exactly what I do. I would say that's probably the most important thing.
That's great. Yeah, and it's funny because I've actually never worked in a corporate environment, but I've had in previous lives had corporate clients, and we do have some now, with as well as what we do in the sales and lead gen space. And but my wife though does work in corporate, and it's or did for a long time, and it is there's a lot of different games being played, right? It's not the same thing that you experience with startups or smaller companies where people care about value and revenue. It's more about signaling and lack of transparency and all these things, and I'm not an expert on it by any means, but I guess to bring this to more relevant stuff to what you're doing now, can you give us the lay of the land on Twiby, like as much as you're willing to share, like how big is the team, who you're working with, what you're doing, and that kind of thing?
So Twiby is a 5-person team. So I'm full-time, 4 part-time consultants. And so 2 of them work behind the scenes. So they're working more like on building the agency. They're doing like PR outreach, backlink generation for SEO. And then the other 2 are client-facing digital marketing strategists. We provide services for Google Ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, SEO, and email marketing.
How did you land on that set of services? What kind of put you in that direction?
Yeah, we started with all of the digital services, so organic social media and a couple other channels like programmatic, some other things. And we're just really inefficient. So like someone comes in with like a web development project, and so I would take the project, and then it's like I don't have process set up for this, so it's just like my hourly rate gets destroyed. And so I realized we really need to like hone in on exactly the services that we're best at. And so those were the services that were left over.
Gotcha. And can you remind me how long has the agency been around again, and how many years have you been kind of testing these things?
Yeah, it's been 2 years. And then I've been consulting overlapping with corporate for about 4 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you kind of landed on like you mentioned, Facebook ads and kind of basically like ad related services and that kind of thing. What industries are you guys focusing on again?
Yeah, so we tend to do really well with like products, in particular for like food and bev. That tends to go really, really well. We have clients that are for every $1 spend, they're making $4, like multiple clients that are
Yeah.
making massive revenue. Also software and business services, professional business services.
What have you learned that maybe has surprised you about how people are making those purchasing decisions? And I guess to frame out that question a little bit, when I think of like Facebook ads for e-commerce and food and beverages, it's like I think of it as like entirely impulse buys. Like people are just like doom scrolling, and then there's like, whoa, that looks cool. And then all of a sudden you purchase this thing at 10 at night when you're like half asleep and you're like, oh, but that's probably a stereotype or a cliche. Like, how do you feel about that process?
So one of our clients, they're a winery in Napa Valley. And so we just couldn't get anyone to purchase. It was really difficult. And so, just looking at the funnel and like what could we get people to do, we noticed that there was a small amount of booked reservations. So basically, you go online, you don't have to pay with a credit card, you just reserve a time and then you pay once you get to the winery.
Hmm.
And so because we saw there was a small amount of people that were actually signing up for these book reservations, we just took our whole budget and started like pushing into that. And so the winery is super busy. They had their first seven-figure year. So I think it's a little bit of we have to warm you up a little bit. We can get you to the winery, but it was really difficult to get you to purchase at any point, day or night. So that was pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that is like regardless of the actual price of going to a winery, like I think of that as a high cost offer because it also involves time and commitment and all these things, right? And trust versus like buying a bottle of wine or buying XYZ, e-commerce product. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like what does the process look like for high cost or high commitment versus low cost?
Yeah, so usually I always try to promote the low costs. I just want a low barrier to entry. So whether it's e-commerce or you're going for a tasting experience or you offer software, I always try to go for the lowest costs. I want you to just test out the product or service, have a great experience, and then try to level you up from there. Which I wouldn't really do that through ads. I'm always the new customer acquisition channel, and then usually the client will try to upsell you from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. To shift gears a little bit, I think one thing that's on a lot of listeners' minds is positioning, differentiation, niching, specialization. There's a million ways to kind of talk about the same thing. It sounds like you've got a few different services, handful of services, maybe a few different industries. How do you think about that? How do you think about specializing, in a crowded market these days?
So we honed in on our channels that we offer. So that definitely helps. And then in terms of like niche, we basically try to speak to what we've done in the past. So that kind of like influences our niche because it's just easier to sell you, right? Like we send you a cold email, which that's really tough in itself, right? It's in like 10,000 emails, just get one booked appointment. But let's just say I send you a cold email. But when we build the email list, you're in food and bev or we had worked with like Magic Eden, their NFT marketplace, valued at over $1 billion. It's like if you're in that space, you'll know the name, right? And so when we send you an email, we reference them, and so then hopefully you get on the call because you're enticed by the giant in your industry. And then I can speak to the results, and I can speak in like really deep detail about what we did for them.
Yeah, that's cool. And now you're speaking my language a bit, talking about cold email. And I'm glad you said that because it's such a great way to win clients is just it's just direct and it's like, why not go out and make a relationship with somebody you want to do business with now instead of waiting for them to like maybe stumble upon you because you wrote a white paper 6 months ago or something. Do that too if it works, but also reach out. So I love that, and that definitely maps to our experience doing outreach for clients, where it's like it's really about specificity, right, and being able to say like we've done this for people like you, and we should probably talk, and then we get fancier with that. We look at individual relationships and data mining and all this stuff. But to bring this to you, can you talk more about that? It doesn't have to be cold email, but like what have been the growth drivers for your business? Like how are you typically winning clients these days?
So we're doing quite a bit. In particular, me, just really like I spent a lot of time on the website, and I was just putting tons of hours into that. And there's always kind of like as like a agency owner, there's just a lot of like seasons, right? So there's a season of marketing automation, so just automating a ton of things. Then there's a season for building the website, and then now it's a season for lead generation. So getting into lead generation, we've landed a few clients off of cold email. They tend to be like smaller clients, kind of want more for their budget. So sometimes that's a little tough, just saying things are out of scope. I'll send you pricing for that, no problem. So a couple of cold email. I've been doing a lot of speaking presentations. So we did land one really solid client that's been going on for 9, 10 months now. So the return on that is amazing. I joined a thing called BNI. So they are a national thing. It's a business networking group. So we did land a smaller client off that. Tons of referrals and lots of upsells.
Very interesting. I love that framing of seasons. I think that's like a good way to think about it, because you can easily do too many things at once, especially when you're talking about marketing automation, websites, and that kind of thing. And like, it was just on our site the other day, and I'm like, I can't even look at this because it's just going to make me stressed and mad. And we'll find out so many things that we need to be doing that we're not doing on the inbound front and that kind of thing. So, to bring this to a question, how have you identified those seasons and how have you kind of prioritized them and what to do when?
I had this big plan. I was like, man, I'm going to get to a 7-figure agency. I'm going to do it quickly, right? And so I had someone on my team essentially go out and build a list of lead generation providers, right? Like LinkedIn outreach, email outreach, Facebook outreach. And so I said, well, that season, if this works out, they're going to send me so many leads because I'm going to hire 3 agencies to do this, and they're going to send me so many leads that my automation has to be good, right? If this many leads are going to flow into my pipeline. So I was like, okay, so before the lead gen season starts, infrastructure needs to happen through marketing automation. So that dictated that season for marketing automation. Then I finished that and I said, okay, now let's get the lead gen agencies all set up. And so we ran 3 agencies all at the same time. They each had a 2-month trial, and one was telemarketing, one was LinkedIn outreach, and the other one was like Facebook/Twitter outreach. And we're phasing out the last one, but yeah, it didn't work.
Gotcha. That's a great way to do it. And yeah, how well is it, like what's worked with the other two or what hasn't worked?
Yeah, so the telemarketing agency. So at first it was not working. There's just zero interest in the services that they were promoting. Then we made some tweaks, and then we started to see like leads, like booked appointments. And so I was getting pretty excited. So then I would, during the time at which the meeting was booked, the person would never pick up, right? And so then I have to like manually look on their website. I'd find their phone number, give them a call, and they had no idea who I was. They didn't remember like the call at all. And so that went on for a while, and it's very time consuming as well. You're like
Yeah.
chasing these people. And so I felt like I was a part of the telemarketing agency because I'm also looking at numbers and building a list and
Yeah.
telling them I need you guys to also jump in. So that's why that agency didn't work. Yeah. And then the LinkedIn agency, I do think LinkedIn cold organic outreach, I think it works. I think I just picked the wrong agency. I have to really, I just told the agency yesterday that we'll have to end the agreement, but I just had to like remind them a lot. Did you max out the messages this week, the connection request? And I was like, no. And it's like, okay, well, let's do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that's what we see a lot is that a lot of the times these types of like lead gen agencies are incentivized based on meeting count, right? So they're gonna have to like hit that number regardless, or else they're gonna like lose money on the project. So guess what's gonna happen? They're gonna hit that number. But those people are either bad fits or they're not really that interested, they're not committed, and then it ends up like wasting time and everything like that. But regardless of kind of getting into the weeds there, let's kind of like bounce back to marketing automation, because it's one of those like buzzwords that can mean so many different things. It can mean like doing one particular automation, or it could mean like this massive machine. But let's talk about like what's worked for you guys, in the context of B2B and selling agency services. Like what are like the few automations you found to be really useful?
Yeah, so part of that whole process was finding the right CRM, which we use Close CRM. It's pretty inexpensive.
Yeah.
It has some pretty good functionality. Close CRM is what we use, Zapier, and then PandaDocs for sending out contracts. And so basically the automation is set up so that if I take a call with a client, I fill out a form. And after the call is completed, it's just basic questions like how much do you want to spend per month? What services are you interested in? really simple things. And so when the call ends, I submit the form through like a Google form. And so all the information gets sent to the CRM, and then it auto creates a proposal. And so basically all I have to do is just go into the proposal and just review it just to make sure it all looks good. I don't have to build it at all. And so then right when I get off the call, I can send you a proposal in 10 minutes because it just took me 10 minutes just to review it. So then if you sign the proposal, it auto creates using Zapier, it'll auto create your first invoice. And then I just have to review the invoice, takes maybe 5 minutes, and then I can send that off to you. And then if as soon as you pay, it'll update your lead status to customer. And then it auto creates your client folder in Google Drive. Just all your onboarding docs are auto created. Just a ton of things just happen super quickly.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that that's really useful, like a huge time saver once you get to the stage of somebody being like, okay, like I'm interested and we're ready to move on to the next step. Can you talk a little bit though about what do you do in the sales process where like you've done outreach, somebody's like, this is interesting, don't know if it's for us yet, but I'll talk to you. Like, can you talk about your process in that situation?
Yeah. So, okay. So in the past, so I had been very busy just trying to like website. There's just a lot of balls to juggle. And so if someone said they weren't interested, I would almost kind of like just move on. I wouldn't really like reach out to you too hard. Maybe I tried once if I really thought about you, but for the most part, I just kind of let it just kind of disappear because there's just too many things going on. But now as time has gone on, I'll chase you for months now. If you say I'm thinking about it, I say, well, when do you want me to check up? And you say, well, 1 month from today. I go, okay. So then I put a reminder on my calendar and I'll hit you up right at 1 month. And if you say, give me another 2 months, okay. And then I'll put another 2 months out into the future. And so I have leads that I'm chasing for 4 or 5 months right now. And I'm not going to stop until they explicitly tell me I'm not interested anymore.
Right. And that's the right way to do it. The devil's in the details. And I think one thing you said earlier in the context of building ad campaigns for clients is like getting, customers in through the low price thing to sell them the high price thing. And I get asked that a lot for agency services, like how should we package this stuff? How do we get people involved? Because the hard thing is you reach out and then people are like, this is interesting. And you're like, whatever, it's X thousand per month retainer. And they're like, okay, well, I can't just make that happen out of thin air. It's going to take time for us to build a coalition or whatever, get on the same page and internally and sign up and all that stuff. So can you talk about that a little bit? Like, it's okay if it's not figured out because it's a hard question, but what are your thoughts there? Like, what have you found to work for just like getting people on board and making that a low lift?
Yeah, I always try to ease the client into it. I mean, maybe if I perceive you have budget, like if you have like a 100-person team, then that's not much of an issue. But if you're a smaller client, usually what I'll do is I'll just start with an audit. And so the audit's about $1,500. And so I just say there's no commitment. You can take this audit and you can have someone else implement it. You can do it yourself. If you like it would move us into like a retainer, which we can talk about that later. It's definitely not the focus on this call. But yeah, 1,500 is usually all it takes to get started.
Yeah, let's dig into that more because that's super interesting. And I know that like an audit's not a new idea. Like lots of agencies do that. What have you found to work for selling it, for making it really attractive? Because I think when prospects hear audit, they're like, okay, great. It's like a pre-made PDF. It's got a bunch of information on it. I'm too busy to do anything. I just want to hire somebody to do this, but I don't have enough money yet. I don't have enough pain. Like, how do you successfully sell an audit, in your opinion?
I wouldn't say I have it like all the way down. It's not perfection by any means, but
Yeah.
sometimes if you're on the call with me and we're talking, we just redesigned our audit. I don't recommend this at all, but it was in a spreadsheet and it was just like it was good information, but the way it was presented was not pretty. And so we just redesigned it so it's in a nice Google Sheets presentation. It looks really nice. There's images in there, et cetera. And so if I'm on the call with you, I think like visually, like for you to see the actual audit, I'll show you an example while we're on the sales call. And so I'll just say, this is what we do for our clients. And I'll kind of like run through it real quick of just 5 minutes, just let you just get a glimpse at what you'll get for that 1,500. And so I do think that helps. We don't have a 100% close rate by any means, but I think it helps to see it.
Yeah, and that's really key. And it's kind of like a forehead slapper, but I've found that to work as well, is like just showing somebody what's in there, and it should look cool and, and look interesting and useful and everything. So I think that's big. And one thing that you touched on earlier is upsells. Let's talk about that. What's worked for you guys in terms of upsells?
If the performance is good, I mean, it's a pretty easy argument, and it's like reading the room. So if performance is bad, obviously we're not going to ask for the upsell. But if we're generating 200% ROAS for a client, or 300% or 400%, then it just kind of makes sense. And as long as the client's happy and they're making money, then usually they'll want us to run more of their campaigns.
That makes sense. And to dig into that, what are those upsells specifically, and anything you found to work for like the best way to bring them up or position them and the timing and so on?
So most of the upsells are like, so let's say there's a brand. This happened with two of our clients in the past maybe like 2 months. So we have a brand, we're running ads for you, and then usually it's going so well that the brand goes, okay, well now we want to launch this offshoot brand and then do the same thing inside of Facebook or Google Ads. And so it's pretty straightforward. Usually we'll say, when do you want to launch the brand? They'll give us a heads up. And then I'll try to not be too pushy. I already have a relationship with these clients, but I'll usually just kind of wait until we get closer to the date that they originally told me. And then I'll say to them, it takes about a month for us to get ads up, maybe 3 weeks. Usually the creative aspect is what takes the longest to have that develop. So it takes about a month. And so I say, well, when the new brand goes live, if you tell me the new brand goes live July 1st, then I would say June 1st, we should probably start to talk about strategy and get the PO signed. So that's usually how I position it.
That makes sense. And to kind of tie things back to the beginning of the interview, you talked about shopping offer letters and using that to get raises, which is great. And while those exact same dynamics probably don't work, with selling clients and with the agency business, is there anything like that you found to work to like actually use legitimate scarcity to bring clients in or win upsells and so on?
No, but in this call, it makes me think about how could you leverage that. I had she's not quite a mentor, but she's another agency owner that I look up to. And so she would, her whole pitch when she's in calls is she would say, I only work with 5 clients a year. I have 3 that are already booked up. So I have 2 slots left this year. And I'd like for you to take up one of those 2 slots, is what she would tell her clients. As she grew her agency to a multi-million-dollar, web development, and then sold it. So you could do something like that.
Yeah, I think so too. And what we found to work is that it has to be real. It has to be real scarcity. If it's fake, people see through it, but also it just doesn't work as well long term, and you don't communicate it as well. So I think that you can kind of use your weaknesses as strengths. Like it's hard to scale an agency business, right? So you can use that to your advantage and be like, we cap out at this number. We only do this number of onboardings per month. We have these spots open. Is this something we can do? So I think that's a great way to think about it. And to shift gears a little bit, so I think you mentioned, you're at 5 employees now. What are those next hires you're thinking about? Kind of how are you thinking about hiring and training over the next year?
Yeah, still looking for that lead gen expert. That's been it's been on my mind. And so once I find that person, if they can bring in qualified leads into the pipeline, then we move into hiring and getting some full-time people in there. But it's difficult to find a true expert at that, at least up to this point.
Yeah. Oh, I know from hiring that internally for us and everything like that. So we'll talk more. But I guess beyond that, to ask kind of the cliche question, I think right now we're talking with lots of agency owners that and we've interviewed a lot of people that want to do all sorts of different things with their shop. I think an agency can be like a launch pad for something else entirely, or we have other people that just like want to grow and take over the world. What does that look like for you guys? Is there a 5-year vision or something like that? Like, how do you see Twiby in the next few years?
So I used to think 100-person agency would be the dream. And I've talked to other agency owners that reached that dream. And all of the ones that I've talked to have said that it's not what they had thought. And you just become a people manager, and you actually kind of get removed from the thing you love, which is digital marketing in my case. And so just kind of reconsidering, I don't know if I ever get to that point. I probably wouldn't slow it down if we got that big. But I think a nice 10-person team, full-time team would be pretty ideal. You can really control the culture. And my whole thing is I want to be non-corporate. Nothing against the corporate folks, but at least the corporate experiences I've had. And so I really want to make sure there's no games. Everyone's there to like work hard instead of play the political game and try to get close to certain people. So that'd be my dream for the next 5 years. And then if you go out to 50 years, I'd love to get into like real estate investments and passive income. and then travel the world.
Yeah, and hopefully you can do those things in fewer than 50 years.
Yeah,
Then you'll
so
be
yeah.
old, man. You won't be tired.
Okay. Yeah, maybe 30, 35 years.
Yeah,
That's
I think maybe even less than that. But no,
okay, 20.
it sounds like a meaningful thing to do, and I appreciate you sharing. Yeah, Brent, thanks so much for your time. Where can people go to follow what you're up to and get in touch and all that good stuff?
Yeah, you guys can check us out at twibbiagency.com. So TWIBI agency.com.
Awesome. We'll get that all linked up. Brent, thanks again.
Thanks.